research is my speciality, and so there's going to be quite an emphasis on that. I'm working on this project with my husband, Martin. He's proud to say he's a chartered engineer, and that has put a really good aspect onto this project. We're amateur archaeologists, and I mean that in the correct sense of the word. We don't get paid for it. And I must say this, the scrabbling around for funds must be the worst part of the professional's job. On this project, we've had help, advice, and input from the professionals at Bournemouth University, especially as they wrote the report, which led to the wreck being scheduled in March this year. Despite being inordinately busy, they've returned phone calls, emails, and been happy to read our submission to the Adopt-a-Wreck scheme. Neptune has decreed that they still haven't dived on the wreck with us, but it's on the plan for next year. So this presentation is mainly about the work we amateurs with the technology available to amateurs, and there's an emphasis on research, but how many times have you sat in an audience and thought, how do they know that? You never know. It might even inspire some of you to book on the course, Practical Guide to Using Online Archives, in January. I'm going to tell you about a wreck. She's 4 miles from Durdle Door and popularly known as the Pin Wreck. Last year, she was identified as mooring lighter number 8 or yardcraft number 8, depends on the mood of the Admiralty and the Dockyard. There have been many hours of research gone into this project, and it's still ongoing, with as many questions being raised as present themselves. Yeah, it worked. Back in 1991, a fisherman snagged his nets on something that turned out to be a small vessel full of spidge. The broad arrow and equipment found on her, which included diving equipment, identified her as a naval vessel. And buttons on uniforms on the cargo that weren't used till 1890 gave us a date before which it couldn't have sunk. John Hinchcliffe's Dive Dorset says that she's called Pin Wreck because of all the pins divers are avidly collecting. Not anymore, they're not. They've had them away. I confess, I got one up myself, declared it to the receiver, and then gave it to Peter Northam to be the copper to be analysed on it. Dave Parham and Tom Cousins of Bournemouth have managed to find some of the items pilfered from the wreck, including 2 pulley blocks, which must weigh 1/4 of a ton each. They're safely in storage and will have a permanent home at some point. We think there may be more pulleys lying on the seabed to the stem of the vessel. Further exploration and photogrammetry of that section is on the list for next year. I first dived her in 2002. She's a lovely and unusual wreck, but at 28 metres in a tidal area within Lulworth Ranges, with the army firing live ammunition out to sea, don't dive her as often as I'd like. This sketch is 20 years old, but for me to tell you what is where, it works. She's got 2 large cylindrical objects towards the stem, which many divers mistake as boilers. They're actually mooring buoys, and they're home to at least 4 species of crustacean. Today, you take a camera or a video. GoPros are common. From that, you can create a photogrammetry image so that when the army are trying to shoot divers, you can spend the time highlighting what to look at, or spend some time on a better photogrammetry image ready for your next dive. Behind the buoys, a huge... Come on. You can do it, yes. Behind the buoys is a huge pile of chain, and that's home to a shoal bib. On closer examination, you'd find that there are shackles in that pile, and are they part of the cargo, or are they part of the workings of the wreck? A wooden bulkhead separates the cargo area from the machinery at the end of the stern. Behind the bulkhead, there's a wheel, and that seems out of place. It's not connected with the other machinery. So we're wondering if it's a pump. And on the seabed, there is what looks like to be pumping equipment. Now, is that part of diving equipment, or is that part of the pump for the actual vessel? We'll find out one day. Ah, yes, it worked. There you can see the wheel as it comes up there. Right. Why has it taken over 30 years to identify the vessel? The Navy was one of the biggest bureaucracies the world has ever known. It's arguable that they pulped more timber for paper than they did in building ships. There must be a record somewhere. For several years, I've been looking through the indices and digests starting in 1890. But more recently, Tom Cousins looked where I wouldn't have dreamed of looking. Lloyd's lists. Now that is for merchant vessels. But Tom found an entry in September 1903 of a lighter sinking in a storm. But which lighter? Using some microfilm of local newspapers, not yet digitised, I found some reports of the night in question, and we pieced together a story. HMS Enterprise, that was a tug based at Portsmouth Dockyard, was touring a mooring barge to Portland Harbour. A hurricane came through the channel, doing a lot of damage. Times had several columns on it. Either the tow broke or it was cut, but they got the 30 men on board, and Enterprise went boldly into harbour, so no one was lost. In the digest, I got to 1901. With Tom's find, I skipped a couple of years and identified her and linked the loss of her cargo by comparing it to what was on the vessel and the spidge that had been recovered. Yes. Mooring lighter number 8. In the 1860s, the Admiralty had renamed all vessels in dockyards as yardcraft number whatever. In 1903, it appeared not to be insisting on this as rigorously, so she's mooring lighter number 8 at this point. Once we'd identified her, finding her history must have been easy. Yeah, right. Bournemouth had turned up a book by the late David Lyons, who was the curator of ships' plans at the National Maritime Museum, eventually becoming chief of research. This has a section on vessels that were not classed as ships. Dockyards were full of boats, lighters, barges, cutters, tugs, and all that are essential to the smooth running of the Navy and the dockyards, they're seldom mentioned. We don't hear about them. They're the forgotten fleet. David Lyons indicates that mooring lighter number 8 was built in the 1860s and that she was sold in 1897. If she was sold in 1897 and she'd been leased back, as local authorities do today, is that why she's in Lloyd's list? Don't know. I wrote to his co-author, Riff Winfield, through the publisher. Not had a reply yet, so I'm waiting for that. So, technology. The most technological time, I believe, to be the 1860s. So many things were changing. Mass production of steel machinery and steam power changed transport and lives. The first ironclad steam vessel for the Royal Navy, HMS Warrior. The Suez Canal opened in 1860, leading to wooden sailing vessels being replaced by much larger steam vessels. Revolutionary new levels of communication and methods of warfare were introduced. New railways were carrying cargo, people, and post. Sunday schools were teaching children to read, and adults as well. That was creating demand for newspapers and something to wrap this newfangled fish and chips stuff in. The workforce had to change. People had to be better educated, more able to allow a design plan to be trained to design equipment. Does any of this sound familiar? The media tell us how fast technology is moving today, but I'd argue that the greater change was back in the 19th century. It's an interesting debate, and I'll be happy to continue it in the pub. 21st century technology can give us a representation of 19th century technology, especially the capstan on the winch. This was done using a compact camera, a GoPro, and low-cost software, techniques and technology available to the amateur. At the end of the day, it's still a sketch, but it will improve. With the difficulties of tides, army firing weather, we felt it was best to have something to work with. It's not perfect, but it helps us understand what is there. For example, over the years, we'd always assumed the two gears at the top of the reg used to mesh together. You can see how easy that mistake was to make. It's not until you get the crystal clear visibility of photogrammetry that it becomes obvious that this is not true. The smaller gear was originally vertical and driven from the engine below and slightly forward of it. The shaft has collapsed down, but still has two bevel gears driving another shaft across the barge with a worm that used to mesh with and drive the worm gear. We can see how clearly how the arrangement of the original machinery. You can see half-metre scale in a couple of places. I know divers who swim into that gap there. I think they do it. That one. People swim in that. But you can also see in there how it's eroding away. This is being sandblasted for several hours a day. It's an 8-inch shaft. It's the only thing that is keeping that upright. That worm wheel, we've calculated, weighs 3 tons. I do not want to be there when it does collapse. So, the mid-19th century technology was changing fast. Ships were getting bigger and anchors were changing from rope cables to chains. This was changing the technique of raising anchors. A fabulous example of this is down the road with HMS Warrior. Her main winch is manual. And according to AI, it was made by John Penn and Sons. I'm going to check that at some point. It took over 100 men to raise the anchor, and on 2 decks, a lot of space. Later, she was fitted with a steam winch, which needed far less men. If you need to know about engineering technology, where better to begin the search than the Institution of Mechanical Engineers? Having a chartered engineer on the team actually has its advantages. This was my first visit to the Lake Victorian building in the heart of London. The library is a blend of 21st century quiet workroom and Victorian gentlemen's club, with periodicals and the books stacked up on each side, and there's still that smell. I was kicking myself when I was putting this presentation together because I didn't take any photographs. It was a fruitful day, but there was one thing that really frustrated me, and that was Harfield's hand-powered capstan and windlass, figure 199. It's used on board the largest ocean-going steamers and by Her Majesty's government, and is so well known that a detailed description is unnecessary. The capstan is one step in a series of revolutionary changes to capstans in the 19th century. Wood was replaced by iron, then steel, chain replaced rope, gears assisted manpower that was replaced by steam, only to be superseded by hydraulic and electric power. We visited Warrior. At one of the refits, she was given a steam winch, which has on it Brown's patent capstan. Thomas Brown was the stepfather of William Harfield, who was taken into the firm, becoming Brown and Harfield, and later just Harfield. The Navy sourced many of its winches from outside, and Harfield was a prominent supplier. So as a working hypothesis, we're looking at Harfields as the probable manufacturer of the winch. William Harfield and Thomas Brown were precious about their winches. They not only filed patents over here and in the US, but would go to court to defend them. It was their livelihood. What would you do? Patents are public documents. Since the cyber attack on the British Library in 2023, you can access patents by finding them in the card index at the back of the Business and IP Centre, and then ask the staff to find the bound copies for you. Technology comes with its problems, but the backups work too. You wouldn't present this to an engineering company to build you a winch, but it does give you the idea of how it worked, and it establishes that Harfield thought of it first in the eyes of the law. Both Brown and Harfield lived in London, but digging deeper into the company, I discovered that they were actually manufactured in Blaydon. That's modern-day Tyne and Wear. As we were visiting Scotland this year anyway, we broke our journey in Newcastle to visit the Tyne and Wear archives. They've got no records of Harfield and Co., but they did have some fabulous drawings of capstans by Armstrong and Co. And that's the same company that Nick mentioned this morning, and we've all seen them in Lloyd's Register. Martin, in his youth, earned his living as a draftsman. So this was a delight for him. It's a wonderfully detailed plan an engineering company could use to build a capstan. It has all the information that's needed. It's a treasure. Here's a list of components that they needed. In the bundle, each of those components has its own detailed drawing. I could have left him there for weeks. One reason for spending so much time on the capstan is that mooring lighter number 8 was built around 1866, before Warrior's refit and before other steam mooring lighters in Portsmouth. Is this the first steam winch in the Navy? If that's so, the importance of it being shed-ruled increases, especially if she has the machinery which powered it. So that's another question to be answered. This slide may not work well, but I want to draw your attention to the horn at the front. There'll be more about that later. I did think you wanted to see the layout of the vessel. Bournemouth University found this plan of mooring lighter number 5. They had it digitised from the plans section in the National Maritime Museum. It's slightly different to mooring lighter number 8, that's the pin rack, but very similar. If we focus on the winch section, it's a better slide to see. It was built in 1868 in the Dockyard here in Portsmouth. Didn't go into service until January 1869. The work overran. Some things do not change. From this section, you can see that the drive of the worm is different. There are no bevel gears. There's no shaft across the beam of the barge. And the worm is a right-hand worm, not a left-hand worm, as we have on number 8. Was this a design improvement learned from experience, or was it a cost-cutting exercise? There are no plans at the Maritime Museum for number 8. It doesn't mean there are no plans, it just means we can't find them. They may never be found, so we work with what we have. The Lyons Winfield book says that number 5 was built in 1869 and that number 8 was built in 1866. and we thought we'd found the source of their information when we stumbled across correspondence in the Caird Library of the Maritime Museum. It's one-sided correspondence from the Admiralty to the Admiral Superintendent at Portsmouth Dockyard. If anyone finds the other half of that conversation, I want to know. They're bound, handwritten letters. One piece of technology I really wish they'd invented sooner is the typewriter. I'm not sure that this is the source of the information because there are discrepancies. For example, number 5's predecessor, according to David Lyons, was broken up, but several letters chart her being towed to Deptford and converted into a dredger. The survival of letters for 1866 is patchy, but requests for manpower and repair suggest that number 8 went into service before the 31st of October that year. Therefore, she's actually older than number 5. And it does confirm that numbers were reused as craft were replaced. The letters mention various reports to Parliament, including reports for the Yardcraft Committee. And this report is in the Caird Library. It shows how concerned Parliament was about the cost of the Navy. Well, we were between wars, so cost cutting was politically driven. Published in 1868, covering costs for 1866 to 1867. It includes £6,121 per building of number 6. In both the correspondence and the Lyons book, number 8 is the only one built in that period. The supporting tables in the same reports refer to lighter number 8. So the number 6 referred to is a typo. Things don't change. The £6,121 translates in today's money as nearly £1 million. We think there may have been more of these reports, and we currently think the best chance of their survival is in the parliamentary libraries. My late father always said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And a local project I've been involved in has brought me into contact with the daughter of a peer. And her dad is going to get me access to the librarians and some copies of things at the House of Lords. So hopefully that should happen sometime. 1974, another steam mooring lighter was planned to replace number 11. We'd already found the plans for this using the digital catalogue of the Maritime Museum, although we didn't know it was number 11 at the time. We think this is 11, and these plans were photographed for us by us using a compact camera at the National Maritime Museum and stitched together in Photoshop. Amateurs can use it. The catalogue of ships' plans is available on the National Maritime website, and you can book an appointment to visit and look at them. Just don't be in a hurry. There's a 3-month waiting list. Alternatively, you could talk Peter into organising another NAS trip to the plans section, and that way you get more points towards your certificate or award. There are 3 drawings in the bundle. It's more a layout of what the vessel that looked like than you'd hand to a shipwright today. We heard this morning about shipbuilding in ancient Egypt. It's a long tradition of a respected craft. To hand them something like this would be like teaching their grandmothers to suck eggs. That leads us to consider these more as a 19th century PowerPoint of the vessel's concept rather than detailed plans. I found a specification in the catalogue which I thought was not relevant. Could be interesting, and we're going to Woolwich anyway, so I ordered it. Yep, I was wrong. It's a specification for a steam mooring lighter built at the Dockyard in Malta in 1884. So that's 10 years after 11, and things had to have been moved on by then. And then we turned the page. This was actually built first in Portsmouth, and it's the 1875. These are the specifications for mooring lighter number 11. The first words on the page, you can see them highlighted. Andrew Chung, he's the curator of plans, said that there are so many plans there and they're so short-staffed that this was the first time these had been brought out to be examined in any detail. It could have waited for decades before the tie-up was made. Well, then it was Martin's turn to wish for the typewriter. He transcribed the specification into a more legible Word document, and all you amateurs know that Word's available. You couldn't build a vessel to this specification today. Well, for one thing, where would you get the English elm from? The amount of wood going into this small, that's only 28 metres long by 8 metres wide vessel, it would fell a temperate rainforest. It's no wonder that Nelson was worried we'd run out of wood, and changing to ironclads was very timely. Did that help drive the decision, I wonder? You can do it. There we are. What can we do with this information to learn more about the design? Here we have the winch, which is the main focus of Martin's photogrammetry. But what we can do with this is isolate one part. This is a worm gear, and we've got a full 3D representation of it. From here, we can import it into a CAD system. We're using Autodesk Fusion 360, and that is an amazing piece of design software. It's available as freeware. Some of our godsons work in major engineering companies, and they really rate the full-blown megabit book version. With some engineering knowledge, you can redesign components directly over the photogrammetry, experiment with different design parameters. For example, the teeth were really questionable, but we worked out what it was. And when it fits, hey presto, you get a 3D drawing of the worm wheel. We can now understand the principles that they applied to the mechanical design. But what do you do with that? I mentioned godsons. 4 of them are into 3D printing. Who knew that 3D printing is a competitive sport? They've got their eyes firmly fixed on both our photogrammetry and the CAD drawings. In May this year, we attended the NAS course on understanding VR. Alongside us on the course was Dave Johnson, whose presentation yesterday about the virtual diver trail we've taken on board. And that software is available to we amateurs. Outreach is a very, very important aspect of maritime archaeology. What the general public do not know about, they do not care about. We want to use this initially in a different way. Both the photogrammetry and CAD drawings can be used as virtual assets in VR for both the wreck as she is today and how she was before September 1903. From these, we can learn much about the vessel, how she was built, how she was used during her working life. Using today's technology in this way is driving the traditional research to provide the inputs and opening more doors to the past. Martin, ever the engineer, is building a scale model of her. He's been walking around this conference with this tiny thing in his pocket, telling anyone who's listened to him about left-hand threads, worm gears, etc. He started building the model, and hopefully one day we will have a table in the foyer of the conference to show off his skill. It's created the need for research for the uniforms for the model crew, who will give the viewer a sense of scale. Talking of things to do, as you can see, she's very much a work in progress. We accepted her under the Adopt a Wreck scheme in 2022 and have submitted a report that I'm sure Mark will give you access to if you ask him nicely. This list is in terms of what have been in this presentation only. The real list is much, much longer. You know, the last is to create some kind of timeline for a working life. And one item on that timeline, which is significant, is the raising of HMS Eurydice. Bournemouth University also found some pictures, a painting and a sketch. And yeah, this painting is in Osborne House. You can just imagine it, can't you? Presented to Queen Victoria. Here you are, your match. Picture of your ship that sunk round the corner from here. So, look at the land side. You can see there's 2 mooring lighters there. Look at the horns on them. Those are the things sticking out the front. They're different. The one on your right has got like the drawing on number 5. The one on your left is of what we think is number 8, but we're not sure. That bit we think is sitting on the seabed at the front. So that's on the list next year to go and look to see if we can find that curve. Now, I know that number 8 was there. The other's either 5 or 11. How do I know that number 8 was there? Because Bournemouth had found this as well. It's from the Daily Sketch, 27th of April, 1878. And it clearly shows the stern of 2 mooring lighters. The one on your right, if you look carefully, you can see the number 8 on it. You can't see the number on the other. If you could just look very carefully at the horns, the one on your right looks like it might just be curved, which adds credence to our thoughts. So we do have representations of what she looked like. The librarian in the Dockyard Society is looking through old photographs to see if he can spot any other of her or her contemporaries. So I want to thank Dave and Tom from Bournemouth for getting this vessel scheduled. It's a lot sooner than we would have done on our own. What we've got sitting on the seabed is a rare, if not unique, part of a technologically exciting time in our history. She may not be a romantic fighting ship, but she was part of the forgotten fleet, which kept the fighting ships afloat. We can learn so much about the development of steam machinery in the Navy from her. Using archives and modern technology, we can piece together the life of an everyday working craft of a very exciting era. Thank you.
Sheilah, I do have that part here, and would be, of course, with your permission, happy to share.
Yes, sure, not a problem.
I'm just going to have a little look at.
Well, at the end, we'll show you both bits.
We've got 3 minutes or so. There we go. We've got Dave with a question on the left.
Question, and Sheilah and Martin, is why a left-hand worm gear? Is it anything to do with the layout of the rope? And therefore the way the rope holds around the windlass and doesn't tighten.
The answer to that is no. But it is to do with the forces on the winch. And we also think it is to do with where the machinery was and which of the wood supports within the vessel. The longer version, Martin will tell you at the break.
Anybody else? So you've been diving it a long time.
Yeah, 30 years or so.
Change over that amount of time in terms of, is it heavily dived, shotted? You know, it's now scheduled, so people can still visit it.
They can still visit it.
Look, but don't touch.
And please don't visit it when we're there. We don't want you in our photographs when we try and do photogrammetry. But yeah, visit it. She's a beautiful wreck to dive. There's quite a lot of life on her, but in the time, a lot of the pins have gone missing. Things have gone missing. And I do know of one dive club that used to take axes down to take the pins out. I'd like to see some of the other artifacts recovered, and I don't want to see any of it rotting in somebody's garage.
Presumably, being in a firing range, it's not heavily fished, potted.
There's a potter who does, but he's very good about where he puts his pots.
We don't want to lose them and get them stuck in wreckage.
Absolutely, you have to find their local divers to go and get them.
Mel?
I do, yes. She was going to Portland. This is quite a good story because I'd found some plans and that in the Maritime Museum about some changes they were making to Portland Harbour. And when I was looking at the local records, local newspapers, there was a little article in one of them that Portsmouth Dockyard, they were going to stop building ships here, but they were going to start repairing torpedoes. And that was going to tie in with what was happening over at Portland, because the two were under the same administration at the time. And they were going to build a torpedo range at Portland, and they needed to shift things around. And then we did the NAS day down at the hydrographic office, and I got to see the minute books there. And sure enough, they've got all the plans there, and they needed to shift some moorings, and these were being sent to shift those moorings so that they could build a torpedo range. There's a lot I know about this ship that I couldn't cover in half an hour.
Okay, but I'm sure she's around at the break.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a half an hour break. Thank you very much, Sheilah.